The world of investing can be a jungle. Bulls, bears, but worst of all, leeches. They are everywhere. They're at music festivals. They're on dating apps. On crypto exchanges.
Look, I screwed up.
And now, even the local college fraternity. This is the story of how a frat boy from my hometown defrauded 117 of our friends and their families out of $1.1 million. This is ...2016. The school year at UGA is kicking off, and a new class of freshmen has just arrived. One of which is a young man by the name of Syed Arbab. Syed's an out-of-state student from Canton, Michigan, here to study bio, but has picked up on retail trading. He's a recent pledge at the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity, and he's just used what little money he has to start his very own hedge fund called Artis Proficio Capital. Now, this was no ordinary hedge fund.
We don't create shit. We don't build anything.
In fact, this was supposed to be a small investment group from within the fraternity, but Syed had bigger ambitions.
Did I want to be a millionaire when I grew up? I wanted to be a billionaire when I grew up.
And with that, the Wolves of Broad Street was created. This was a group chat where prospecting investors could come and share their investment decisions as well as flex their gains, which Syed would do frequently. He would also share these results online, and word began to spread around very fast. So fast, in fact, that by sophomore year, it began to pull in investors from both his hometown and the college campus, until it eventually hit 600 members. And once it was clear that Syed knew what he was doing, he began to form what appeared to be a legitimate hedge fund with members of his fraternity as a means to trade with other people's money. And at first, it did as well as you'd expect. $500 here, $1,000 there. It was all very manageable. That is, until he decided to do his very first YOLO. This is the equivalent of putting all your eggs in one basket as a means to make as high of a return as possible. And with the $30,000 he had made from investing, he found himself in a very considerable position. And with the Fed changing its interest rates very soon, his opportunity would present itself, as he was going to bet on gold rising in price as a result of the Fed increasing the interest rates. And when the day of the announcement came, he hit the jackpot.
His committee decided to raise the target range for the federal funds rate by 1/4 percentage point.
And by the end of it, the options he had placed were worth over $100,000, which is a pretty great way to start your junior year. But with more money came more investors, and as the hedge fund began to grow, so did his spending habits. He got himself a nice new Rolex, as well as some solid gold bracelets. He also bought his first car, but then resold it so he could get a Corvette. This luxurious lifestyle he was living undoubtedly fueling more investments into his hedge fund, until they finally reached $1 million in assets under management. And at this point, it seemed as though Syed was well on his way to achieving his dreams. But remember, this isn't the story of a successful investor. This is the story of a leech.
Did I want to be a millionaire when I grew up? I wanted to be a billionaire when I grew up.
Objective lost.
Not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
In December 2018, I started seeing the market fall. End of December, like going into January, I lost $750,000.
Oh my God!
Now, for most people, this is probably where you would cut your losses or run for your fucking life. But not Syed, because he was an intelligent investor with only good ideas.
I have to try to get the gain back. I decided to go to Vegas. I had to take that risk.
What the fuck?
And just like that, he was off to Vegas. His plan was simple. Take the remaining $250,000 and put it on the roulette table.
At that point, I just kept on like a positive face, telling investors that everything was fine through social media.
What could possibly go wrong?
So I wire him $5,000 and expecting him to make some investment for fun. Get a call from Steven, and he tells me, hey, I don't know why you did that. Syed had actually used all that money to gamble with me. Lost all of my money, plus a bunch of his own.
All in black.
And lose he did in spectacular fashion.
I was under so much time pressure. Losing even more money, bleeding and hemorrhaging.
And when there was no one left to get wire transfers from, he would just take more money out of the hedge fund until there was nothing left. Now, some of you might be asking, how much money could he have actually lost? And while it's impossible to know for sure,
I have no earthly idea.
it's safe to assume he lost close to $250,000. Not to mention his recent activities in Vegas had brought forth a lot of suspicion.
You know, after Vegas, I pretty much started finding some fishy stuff. You know, started monitoring some accounts more.
Because by the time he had returned home, many investors were asking for their money. One in particular was owed around $100,000, and he of course had none of it. And with the deadline quickly approaching, Syed had no choice but to go out and recruit new investors as a means to pay off the old ones.
That's fucking illegal.
Perhaps you were looking to invest at this time. One way was to send him a wire transfer, which is what some people did. Or you could just Venmo him the money. Although, at the time, Venmo had began limiting transactions, maxing users' withdrawal amounts to around $3,000 at any given week, which is how we arrive at our smoking gun.
I'm touching myself tonight.
One investor actually hit that limit.
To Venmo $2,500 to an individual he said was the fintech manager in label transaction Artist Proficio Capital Investment.
Shortly after the money was sent, the fintech manager commented back to see if more money would be sent on Syed's behalf. Confused? You should be.
That was the plan.
Because the fintech manager is actually the 100K investor. When confronted, he tried to play it off as if it were some kind of joke. But both investors didn't find it very funny at all. In fact, they planned to contact the SEC. Arbab, however, was too busy trying to get more money from investors and didn't even take notice. Until eventually, the SEC had arrived. They claimed that no real hedge fund actually existed, and that a majority of investments were placed directly into his bank account. The media, of course, did what they do best.
Tonight, the feds say they're cracking down on a fraud case out of Athens.
Another big story tonight has UGA parents and students fuming.
A UGA student is accused of operating a Ponzi scheme out of a fraternity house where he used to live.
The federal complaint from the Security and Exchange Commission claims that 22-year-old Syed Arbab orchestrated the Ponzi scheme from a fraternity house near campus. He allegedly sold hedge funds and bond agreements promising a return of their money.
The complaint says Arbab operated a fraudulent hedge fund known as Artist Proficio Capital Investment.
To an SEC order freezing all of his assets.
He says Arbab used money transfer apps like Venmo to keep his Ponzi scheme going.
Miller provided text messages apparently showing him and Arbab going back and forth over payment.
And after all of this, they say he only had about $350 left in his account after spending the rest.
Wake up, you piece of shit!
In the days following the SEC's lawsuit, the media had begun covering some of his transactions in Vegas and found out that he had been spending some investor money at gentlemen's clubs. This, of course, only made the story larger and pissed off investors further.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
It was even discussed on Wall Street Bets. Naturally, he did what any stupid millennial would do and went on Twitter to deny all allegations. But the internet, of course, wasn't buying it.
Are you guilty, but you're telling your friends that you're innocent?
And while insults were exchanged on Twitter,
fuck you,
fuck me, fuck you,
109 more investors stepped forward, many of which were friends, former classmates, and their families. But he didn't seem to give a shit. In fact, he continued to solicit investors amidst the investigation.
The SEC filed an emergency order in this case because they say that Arbab continued to try to get new investors even after knowing the SEC was investigating him.
He was also harassing existing investors who were speaking out against him, going so far as to brag about how much he stands to make off the story rights. He also admitted to selling drugs at this time under a super secret alias that he mistakenly set to public.
Go on, son. Have a bump.
And if you thought he couldn't get any dumber, just wait.
Everyone in this room is now dumber.
Because he met with the SEC without a lawyer.
Mr. Arbab met with the SEC alone without a lawyer.
It was here that allegedly he tried to blame others within the fraternity. The investigators, however, were incredibly suspicious.
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
They went on to freeze all of his assets, while the fraternity made an official statement and kicked him out.
Let me in! Let me in!
And let us not forget the beautiful moment in which his Corvette was repossessed. After a few months, his legal counsel, which was likely paid for by his parents, advised him that it was an open and shut case and that it would be easier if he pled guilty to one count of securities fraud. However, his actions on Twitter would later come back to haunt him, as many of his victims took screenshots to show a clear lack of remorse, which definitely didn't help him in the eyes of the judge. And being the narcissist that he is, he thought he'd be out in 2 years. But considering he was rubbing salt in the wounds of his victims, he wasn't gonna get off that easy, as the max sentence in this instance was around 5 years, or 60 months if you want to mark it on your wall. It was clear that the stress had been getting to him just by looking at him.
Now imagine the same sentence spoken by this man. Whoa. Yeah. Suddenly you're very uncomfortable. We're all uncomfortable just looking at him now. Because he's gross, he's ugly, he's a little bit of a monster.
And a monster he was, as many victims came forward during their impact statements and shared a similar story of how they were lured into a false investment opportunity. He did this by lying, stating that he was in the Terry School College of Business, promising over-exaggerated returns on investment, and sent out fake balance sheets to make investors think that their money was growing. But karma just so happens to be a bitch. As he struggled to get any form of character references, he ended up having to beg for one.
Remember way back when I said your mother was a cankerous whore? I'm sorry, man, I did not mean that.
And on September 28th, 2019, he finally pled guilty.
UGA student will serve 5 years for a massive Ponzi scheme he ran out of a frat house. 23-year-old Syed Arbab of Atlanta was sentenced to federal prison on Friday.
Syed Arbab admitted to defrauding victims, including fellow students and their families, of $1 million.
To pay more than $500,000 in restitution to the victims.
Please, drop your weapon, drop it! Or be dropped, homeboy!
I hope you like prison food and penis.
Now, I really do wish I could say this is where our story ends, but unfortunately, it isn't. As during the plea deal, his lawyer negotiated a delayed sentencing due to a pre-existing heart condition until January of 2020. And with his incarceration right around the corner, you'd think he'd want to be on his best behavior. But you'd think wrong, because it was during this time that Syed had another brilliant idea, and it just so happens to involve his favorite brokerage app. Here's the thing, these apps are built to be as convenient as possible. After all, investors want to spend their money right now.
Prices are fantastic. We're not going to do better than that.
And with the right Robinhood subscription, you get access to instant deposits, meaning you get to trade your money before it's officially been sent over by the bank. And there lies the exploitation.
Being exploited by these... No, you're not.
As you could deposit just as much money with an empty bank account as you could a full one. This is known as free riding, and it's incredibly illegal. But there was just one glaring issue.
Houston, we have a problem.
Considering he was just convicted of a felony, he wasn't supposed to be trading at all. And this is when, allegedly, he began recruiting people to open accounts so that he could trade on their behalf. And as you can imagine, many people said,
"Fuck no."
But we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it had people not said,
"Holy shit, yes!"
And off they went to trade illegally to the tune of $2 million. But we'll circle back to that. because it's Halloween time and our boy's feeling very confident.
An Instagram post, and he was dressed up as Jordan Belfort for Halloween.
Someone even said on the comments to that picture of him being the Wolf of Wall Street, aren't you supposed to be in jail? And he comments back,
do I look like I'm in jail, bitch?
Play of the game.
And if we fast forward to his incarceration in January, you'll be disappointed to find out that a sick new mixtape from Wuhan has just made its way to the US mainland.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Which delayed his incarceration for another year. During this time, he didn't really do much, aside from illegally trade and get his ass handed to him by the police.
He needs some milk!
And then he went online to post about it as if he was the good guy. But for all we know, he might have been asking if this guy wanted to invest. So I will throw a flag on the play for unnecessary roughness. And if we fast forward through the worst year of everyone's lives, we can finally arrive at the point everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, isn't that guy supposed to be in jail or something?
Which is his ass going to a federal prison. Since then, he's been rotting away at a level 1 prison camp, but he clearly hasn't gotten any smarter as he got a cell phone in prison so that he could trade and post online, until of course he was caught and thrown in solitary confinement. So what are we to make of all this?
I don't know what to make of this.
What lessons are there? Well, for starters, when the time comes that inevitably someone from your high school asks you to invest, just do yourself a favor and say no. Additionally, anyone you invest with should be a licensed broker and not some student studying bio. You should also keep an eye out for people trying to build a sense of urgency. Chances are they're desperate for your money and need it now. As for how Syed's doing, I'll put it this way. But what about all the unanswered questions? How much is left of the restitutions? What about the free riding scheme? And how much more jail time could he possibly get? For all that and more, make sure you hit that button down below, as I'll be making a follow-up video on his new scheme when more details come out. And until then, remember, invest wisely, my friend.